Hi, how are you? First of all, please, it's very important that you help me to continue creating content. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes and tell me what you think at the end of the video. How is the climate threat? G20 countries recognize climate threat, and Pope calls for action. Leaders from the world's 20 richest countries will recognize the existential threat of climate change, a draft statement showed. Leaders of the world's 20 richest countries will recognize the existential threat of climate change, showed a draft statement seen by Reuters, and Pope Francis said on Friday that COP26 needs to give future generations concrete hope by combining words with acts. The G20, whose leaders meet Saturday and Sunday in Rome and then head to Glasgow, Scotland, for the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, will pledge urgent steps to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Although the historic 2015 Paris Agreement committed its signatories to preserving global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and ideally at 1.5 degrees Celsius, carbon levels in the atmosphere have increased since then. We are committed to addressing the existential threat of climate change, said the draft G20 communiqué, which is still subject to change, as people around the world prepare to take to the streets to demonstrate their desire for political action. We recognize that the impacts of global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius are much less than at 2 degrees Celsius and that immediate action needs to be taken to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. U.S. President Joe Biden will join his G20 colleagues after a setback on Thursday when the U.S. House of Representatives dropped plans to vote on a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. It would have represented the largest investment in climate action in U.S. history. Biden hoped to reach an agreement before COP26, where he wants to present the message that the U.S. has resumed the fight against global warming. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has joined the chorus calling for action at COP26, which runs from October 31 to November 12, saying that the world's political leaders need to give future generations a concrete hope that they are taking the necessary steps and calling for a renewed sense of shared responsibility for our world to drive action. Boris Johnson, UK Prime Minister and host of the event, said this week that the outcome of COP26 is anyone's guess. The communiqué from the G20, the group of countries that accounts for about 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions, said its members recognize the essential importance of zeroing global greenhouse gas emissions or achieving carbon neutrality until 2050. But countries that are at the forefront of the campaign against climate change as they struggle against rising sea levels want immediate action. UN Climate Conference? Why should investors follow COP26? The UN Climate Conference promises to be a milestone in the transition of the economic model, enabling the global carbon market and unlocking billion-dollar investments. A year late because of the coronavirus pandemic, the 26th United Nations Conference on Climate Change, COP26, begins this Sunday, 31, at a time of climate alert. Considered the most important since the signing of the Paris Agreement, in 2015, the COP26 discussions will continue until November 12 in Glasgow, Scotland, and, experts say, should be carefully monitored by investors and entrepreneurs. In a report released in August, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate, IPCC, informed that the planet is warming up faster than expected, in addition to stressing that humanity's responsibility in this process is unquestionable. In the Paris Agreement, the signatory countries pledged to contain global warming at a level well below 2 degrees Celsius this century, with efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius, compared to pre-industrial levels. Each nation is responsible for setting its targets for reducing emissions of carbon dioxide, CO2, and other greenhouse gases, the so-called Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs. The recent IPCC survey, however, indicates that the 1.5-degree mark will be reached or surpassed within the next 20 years. That is, if emissions are not reduced quickly and on a large scale, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, and even 2 degrees, will be out of reach, with catastrophic results. Under the Paris Agreement, nations must update their NDCs every 5 years to reflect larger goals. This should have happened in 2020, but it stayed until 2021, also because of the pandemic. However, the new targets presented so far are not enough, as they point to global warming of 2.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, according to a report by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, released on Tuesday. Fair, 26. Since the signing of the Paris Agreement, climate negotiations have gone through ups and downs. Former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew the country from the treaty and weakened discussions. The new U.S. President, Joe Biden, has put the matter back on top of the agenda. As soon as he took over, he reinstated the U.S. in the agreement. Thank you very much. See you next time.